Prices were rising, the world was changing, and yet one woman remained completely untouched by debt. While families in 2026 drown in credit card bills, Donna Whitfield was raising 3 kids, running a full household, and quietly building real wealth, all on a single income. How? It wasn't about how much she earned. It was a forbidden financial rule, one that's almost erased from our history books. Today, I'm revealing the exact zero-debt system Donna used to beat inflation, a system banks today hope you never rediscover. Donna didn't have an app. She had discipline and 10 quiet habits that put her family's freedom ahead of anyone else's profit. Stay with me, because the biggest secret of all doesn't come until the very end. If old-school wisdom like this interests you, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment below. I read every single one. The Milkman's Secret System. Donna Whitfield had lived on Maple Hollow Road for 6 years before she noticed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, the milkman's truck rolled down the street at exactly 7:15, and every woman on the block was already standing on her porch with a small tin box in hand. It wasn't just milk money. It was something more disciplined, something almost ceremonial. Donna's neighbor, Sandra Kessler, kept a jar on her kitchen windowsill labeled simply "Deliveries," and every Monday night she filled it with coins before the week even began. Sandra called it paying the house before paying herself. The milkman, the iceman, the breadman, all of them were paid first, in cash, before a single dollar touched anything else. Donna asked her once why she didn't just settle the bill at the end of the month like everyone she knew back in the city did. Sandra laughed and said the end of the month was where good intentions went to die. If the milk money was already set aside in coins before Tuesday arrived, there was no way to accidentally spend it on something else. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't clever accounting, it was simply removing temptation before temptation had a chance to exist. Donna started her own jar that same week, and within a month she noticed something she hadn't expected. She stopped worrying about the delivery bill entirely, because it was already gone, already spent, already safe. That small metal jar became the first thread in a much larger tapestry Donna was about to discover. Modern translation. Today, that same pay the house first instinct can be recreated with automatic banking buckets. A separate sub-account that pulls out grocery and utility money the moment a paycheck lands, before it ever reaches a checking account where it can quietly disappear. The 5% nobody talked about. What Donna didn't know yet was that Sandra's jar was only a small piece of something taught decades earlier in home economics classrooms across the country. Sharon Ann Fitch, a retired teacher who lived 2 doors down, remembered the lesson clearly from her own schooling in the 1940s. Every girl was taught a simple, almost invisible rule. 5% of any money that entered the house was to vanish immediately into what the teachers called emergency cash. Not into a bank, not into a visible account, into something no one could touch without real intention. Sharon still practiced it, taking a nickel from every dollar and folding it into a small envelope tucked behind a stack of linens in her hallway closet. She said the genius of it wasn't the amount. 5% was small enough that nobody missed it. It was the invisibility. If money never touched the checkbook, it never became spendable in the mind. It simply stopped existing as far as daily decisions were concerned. Donna tried it the following week, pulling 5 cents from every dollar of the grocery budget and setting it aside without telling herself it was there. 3 months later, when her son's shoes wore through unexpectedly, she opened that envelope and found nearly $9 waiting, money she never remembered saving, money that felt like it had appeared from nowhere. It was the first time Donna understood that the past held financial secrets modern conveniences had quietly erased. Modern translation. This is easily rebuilt today with a round-up savings feature or a standing 5% auto transfer set up the moment a check clears, so the money disappears from view before it can be spent. The linen closet that acted like a bank. It was Cynthia Brannigan, the sharp-tongued widow at the end of the cul-de-sac, who taught Donna the strangest lesson of all, that a linen closet could function as currency. Cynthia bought soap, sheets, and staple goods in bulk whenever prices dipped, not because she needed them immediately, but because she understood something about inflation before most people had the word for it. If a bar of soap cost 11 cents this month, and Cynthia suspected it might cost 14 cents in 6 months, she simply bought 40 bars now. Her linen closet wasn't clutter, it was locked-in value, purchased at yesterday's price and immune to tomorrow's increase. When prices did rise that spring, as they often did in those years, Cynthia's household budget didn't feel it the way others did. She had already paid the old price for goods she'd use for months to come. Donna watched her neighbor's calm household budget with something between admiration and disbelief. Cynthia wasn't hoarding, she was banking in inventory instead of dollars, converting cash into something the rising cost of living couldn't touch. Donna began doing the same with soap, thread, and canned goods, and for the first time she felt like she was standing still while prices moved around her, instead of the other way around. Modern translation. The equivalent today is strategic bulk buying of true staples during sale cycles, paired with a small pantry budget line, treating shelf-stable goods as a hedge rather than an impulse purchase. The club that bought without borrowing. By early summer, Donna had been welcomed into something she hadn't expected, a quiet, informal circle of 6 women who called themselves, half-jokingly, the Tuesday Fund. Phyllis Alderman had started it 2 years earlier when her family needed a new washing machine and refused, on principle, to sign a loan for it. Instead, 6 households each contributed a small fixed amount monthly into a shared tin box kept at Phyllis's house. Every few months, whichever family had the most urgent need received the full pooled amount to purchase an appliance outright, in cash, no interest attached. Then the rotation continued, and eventually every family had received their turn. Nobody paid a cent in interest. Nobody carried a balance. The system relied entirely on trust, patience, and the shared understanding that debt was something to be avoided, not managed. Donna's own turn came in August, when her refrigerator's motor finally gave out, and she stood at the counter of the appliance store with cash in hand instead of a payment book, feeling a kind of pride she hadn't expected from something so ordinary. Modern translation. This is essentially a modern lending circle or sinking fund, a group savings pool where friends or family contribute monthly toward rotating shared goals, avoiding financing charges entirely. 30 minutes that changed everything. Every Sunday evening, after supper dishes were cleared and the children were sent off to bed, Donna's husband Walter sat down at the kitchen table with her for exactly 30 minutes. No radio, no newspaper, just the ledger, a pencil, and the week's receipts spread out like evidence in a quiet investigation. They reviewed every dollar that had entered and left the house that week, out loud, together. It wasn't about blame, it was about awareness. Walter would ask simple questions. Did they need the new toaster advertised in the paper, or did they just want it because everyone else seemed to have one? That 30-minute ritual became the quiet anchor of their marriage's financial life, and Donna noticed something remarkable. Households that skipped this ritual seemed to drift, slowly and invisibly, toward overspending on the era's flashy new conveniences, while households that kept it stayed steady no matter what the economy did around them. Modern translation. A modern version is a weekly 15 to 30-minute money date, reviewing a shared banking app or spreadsheet together, turning financial awareness into a habit instead of a once-a-year panic. The 7 envelopes at the teller window. The most disciplined ritual of all belonged to Joan Callahan, a woman known around the neighborhood for her unshakable calm about money. Every other Friday, when her husband's paycheck arrived, Joan walked directly to the bank before it touched the house at all. At the teller window, she requested the check be split, cash for some portions, a deposit for others, divided immediately into 7 distinct categories: shelter, food, utilities, clothing, savings, church and community, and a small discretionary fund. Each portion went into its own envelope the moment she left the bank. There was no chance for the money to blur together, no chance for grocery money to quietly cover a clothing splurge. Donna adopted the habit within weeks, and she noticed the psychological shift almost immediately. Money that had a specific name and envelope simply behaved differently than money sitting in one undivided lump. Modern translation. This maps directly onto today's cash envelope banking apps or multiple sub-accounts, where a single paycheck is automatically split into labeled digital envelopes the instant it lands. The community that turned hand-me-downs into a college fund. Donna discovered the strangest and most beautiful system that autumn when Betty Whitcomb organized what she called the Circle Basket. Children's clothing and furniture too small or unused for one family were passed to another, quietly and without shame, and in return, families contributed whatever small amount they would have spent on new goods into a shared jar, earmarked entirely for education. What looked like waste to outsiders was in fact wealth being redirected. Betty's own daughter's coats had been worn by 4 different children over 6 years, and the money saved each time went straight into a growing envelope marked college. By the time Betty's daughter turned 16, that envelope held more than anyone would have guessed possible from something as ordinary as second-hand sweaters. Today's modern translation. Today, this looks like organized clothing swaps or buy-nothing community groups, paired with automatically redirecting the money saved into a dedicated education savings account rather than letting it disappear into daily spending. The calculation before the barcode. In the grocery store, Donna watched Nadine Palmer do something that looked almost like magic. Long before unit pricing existed on any label, Nadine carried a small notebook and calculated the cost per ounce of every product by hand, comparing brands, sizes, and prices in seconds. She refused to trust packaging or advertising, trusting only her own arithmetic. It meant slower shopping trips, but it also meant Nadine's household spent noticeably less than neighbors who simply grabbed familiar brands off the shelf. Donna began carrying her own small notebook, and within a few months she found her grocery bill shrinking in a way that had nothing to do with buying less and everything to do with buying smarter. Modern translation. Store apps and unit price comparisons do this automatically now, but the discipline of actually pausing to compare cost per ounce before tossing an item into the cart is the habit worth reviving. The egg money that nobody counted. What surprised Donna most that autumn was learning that Sharon Fitch had her own quiet income the family checkbook never touched. Sharon kept 6 hens in a coop behind her garage, and every week she sold the extra eggs to 2 neighbors down the block for a few cents apiece. It wasn't a business. It wasn't even discussed at the dinner table. It was simply egg money, and by an old unspoken rule, egg money belonged entirely to Sharon, separate from the household budget Walter and Donna reviewed each Sunday. She used it for small things: ribbon for her daughter's hair, a new spool of thread, a birthday gift bought without asking permission from anyone. Donna realized this wasn't about hiding money from a husband. It was about every woman keeping one small stream of income entirely her own, so that even inside a tight household budget, she never felt completely without agency. The kitchen that never wasted a crumb. Donna's own kitchen taught her the next lesson almost by accident. One Thursday, she found herself staring at the remains of Sunday's roast, a half bag of wilting carrots, and the heel of a loaf of bread, unsure what to do with any of it. Cynthia Brannigan, stopping by for coffee, looked at the same ingredients and saw an entire meal. Within 20 minutes, the roast scraps became a hearty stew, the bread heel became croutons, and nothing touched the trash bin. Cynthia called it cooking backwards, starting from what already existed in the icebox instead of starting from a recipe and a fresh grocery list. Families who cooked this way, Cynthia explained, often cut their weekly grocery bill by a noticeable amount without ever feeling like they were sacrificing a good meal. Donna began keeping a running list on the icebox door of what needed to be used first, and within a month, her own food waste had all but disappeared. The basket that traveled from door to door. Every other Wednesday, a plain woven basket made its way quietly around Maple Hollow Road, passed from Phyllis Alderman's porch to the next, then the next. Inside sat whatever a family had extra of that week: jars of preserves, outgrown baby clothes, spare buttons, a sharpened set of sewing needles. Nobody wrote anything down. Nobody expected exact repayment. The basket simply moved in a loose, trusting circle, and whatever a family took one month, they quietly replaced with something else the next. Donna once asked Phyllis how she kept track of who owed what. Phyllis said the moment you started counting, the whole system fell apart. It only worked because everyone trusted it would balance out over time, and it always did. That basket, more than any envelope or ledger, taught Donna that community itself could function as a form of savings account. Modern translation. Local buy-nothing groups, tool libraries, and neighborhood swap pages recreate this same trust-based exchange today, reducing the need to buy items that only get used occasionally. The account even the bank didn't know about. But of everything Donna learned that year, nothing prepared her for what Sandra finally revealed to her the following spring. Tucked behind a false bottom in an old sewing box sat a modest stash of cash Sandra called her silent partner. Money the bank had never seen, money her own husband barely knew existed. It wasn't secretive out of dishonesty, it was protection, built slowly and quietly over years from small leftover amounts nobody would miss, untouched by daily spending or even monthly budgeting. Sandra said she'd used it exactly twice in 20 years, once for an unexpected medical need, once for an opportunity she couldn't have otherwise afforded. The rest of the time, it simply existed, silent and steady, a form of security no bank statement could show and no emergency could easily reach. Donna understood then that everything she had learned that year, the jars, the envelopes, the ledgers, the garden, the linen closet, all pointed toward this same quiet truth. Real financial security wasn't about the size of an income. It was about the discipline of small, consistent, almost invisible decisions repeated patiently over years until they became a kind of quiet wealth no headline or economic downturn could touch. Modern translation. The modern version is a small, rarely touched emergency reserve kept separate from everyday accounts, not hidden from a spouse, but genuinely protected from casual access, reserved only for real emergencies or rare opportunities.